In today's conversation, we walk through an amazing introduction to IGS through one specific vice president's lens. You're going to see today how the unique culture of the company is manifested in the way they think about hiring, the way they build their teams, and the way that they promote. And it's an incredibly enlightening entree into exactly what the work that they do is. I hope that you really enjoy this conversation. I'm Jenny Ray LaRue, the Managing Director of Management Consulted. I am really excited to be here with Raymond today. We are going to talk all about IGS, about the dirty little secrets that you never knew, all the good ones anyhow. And we're going to just get to know the firm. It's a firm that not a lot of people know about, but should. And so it's a great opportunity for us to kind of dive into what has made Raymond's experience they're great, what you should think about if you're thinking about IGS, what you should understand about what the firm does, and maybe even ways that you could get involved. So Raymond, thanks for taking the time to talk with me today.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation to be on.
You bet. Well, first of all, it's just good for us to get to know you. So can you just share a little bit of a brief overview of your background and how you got to IGS?
Absolutely. My name's Raymond Meijer. I'm a vice president at IGS. And I'm originally from Northern California, and then went to school out in Amherst College. So moved to the East Coast, and then I've stuck around here ever since. So a piece of me is still, I feel like, a little bit in California, but certainly have a lot more roots here now on the East Coast. And so I majored in history, and coming out of undergrad, I think with people from history kind of go in all different directions. So I thought about some maybe public policy or think tank, thought about some maybe nonprofit or government work, but then also thought about this big consulting world, and I didn't really know too much about it. And there would be some employers that would come to campus, but I didn't have a full perspective. And so, but I thought it would be an interesting way to use some of the research that I had done in history, and then kind of move it into a professional setting. So I started at IGS. I found it really just kind of circumstantially, just really through the alumni directory back in 2017, and then have been there ever since. So it's been a good journey so far, but really kind of coming from not necessarily a strictly economics or financial background, more kind of broader history, but moving that into then the IGS experience.
Amazing. Now, I have to ask you where in Northern California you're actually from, because I live in the real Northern California. I live in Redding.
Oh, amazing.
So are you from Central California that calls itself Northern California?
Yes. So I'm from the Bay Area. Yes. So I'm from Mountain View originally. And then I went to high school in San Jose. So yes, from technically the Central, but yes. Yeah. I guess I still feel more Northern California than Southern California.
Yeah. When people they're like, oh, you're in a suburb of San Francisco. I'm like, no, it's 4 hours there. They're like, oh, are you in Oregon? No, we're 2 hours south, right? There's this whole state in the northern part. My favorite
Beautiful
meme about
part.
California, by the way, is that it says my favorite thing about California is watching winter on TV.
Yes. Well, I definitely now appreciate all the changing of seasons, which, I didn't have any reference point. So I feel like when I moved to the East Coast, I was like, I know it's going to be cold, so I just need to be prepared for it. But, I think it's definitely been nice to see the seasons, but it's nice to go home to California, for the holidays, to be able to get a little bit more of the warmer weather.
You didn't move to the East Coast, you moved to the North Pole, just so that you know.
Yeah.
So anyhow, well, I've got a lot of great questions for you. The first one is just, have you been, understanding for this whole time that you've been at the firm, how great IGS is? You've been there for 6 years. Can you talk about what the value proposition is? I don't know if you knew it when you started or if it's kind of evolved along the way, but to have somebody stay somewhere in this job market for 6 years is pretty remarkable. So what have they done right, and what did you discover along the way that's really powerful about your time there?
Yeah, and definitely, I had my 5-year reunion last year, and I was probably one of the few who hadn't jumped around to a few different things. So it led me to kind of think about why have I been staying for this long and have continued to stay? I definitely don't think it was something where I realized it right off the bat, though I'd like to think that I kind of had picked up on some of those points maybe when I was first interviewing. I think that one of the big benefits of IGS is that we are a smaller company. We're growing, and we've grown a lot since I started. We were probably 35 or 40 people when I started, and now we're about 60 or 70 people, but we're still small. And I think that's something that, that attracted me to Amherst College for my undergrad experience, but I think is attractive to people coming from whatever kind of education background they're in, because you don't really feel like you're buried. And so I felt like I met a lot of people at the entry level to the consultant level to the management team level. When I was first interviewing, I was like, that's a kind of an interesting sign that like they're spending the time to interview me, just a college senior. And I think that rings true with how we approach our work. I mean, our meetings, our teams are small. As a result, we can be a bit more flexible to the needs of the project. And then I felt like I wasn't just working on stuff in the background that was never going to see the light of day. So I think from a professional development perspective, I felt like I was contributing to work that mattered and to work that mattered to the company and to the clients that we were serving. And then I also thought that I didn't really know what I wanted to do long term. And frankly, still don't really necessarily, but I like the ability to kind of work on a lot of different industries in a lot of different ways. And so that's something that IGS presented and has definitely rang true. And I think as we've gained more experience, I mean, we're now been around for about 25 years. So, we've worked on probably most of the niche industries out there. And that's given us kind of a good ability to use that knowledge to help us inform kind of future engagements that we're working on. And we've been able to see how industries kind of trend and ebb and flow over time.
Amazing. I love that. Well, kind of follow up to that, you're a vice president. What does that mean at IGS? And what does that mean for the types of problems that you're dealing with at the firm?
Yeah. I think titles are so funny to me when I see on LinkedIn or anywhere else where it's like, it's hard to really know, and every consulting firm, every company has their own kind of different levels.
Why can't they get their act together? Banking has it figured out, right? Banking is just like, this is what an analyst is, this is what an associate is, and consulting is like, we're just going to call an associate something different, and we'll just make like a manager whoever, and so anyhow, sorry, back to my question.
No. So it is so funny. So, and that's something I didn't appreciate probably when I first was kind of interviewing. So vice president, at least for IGS, is a little bit more into that. We're now kind of as part of the management team and acting kind of a client facing role. So that would be kind of managing some of the overall, project to project specifics, as well as like overall client relationships and engagement on an ongoing basis, and to see what clients' needs are. But then also kind of looking internally to what are some of the IGS overall operational structure and strategy and business development plans. So that's kind of where the vice president sits, but it's a logical kind of extension from where I was before as kind of a senior consultant all the way down to an associate at the entry level, which is, a lot of our work is really focused on the day-to-day client services on a project basis. So our management team, over time starts to, especially as you move into the managing director levels, starts to be less day-to-day client focused, but still is involved with the client projects. And I think that's something that we probably bring to our clients that maybe some larger firms, there's just more levels where there might be kind of an engagement manager before you kind of even get to the people doing the actual work. For us, because we're smaller, it's kind of all, even the founders are aware of kind of what the day-to-days are going on in a specific project to the appropriate degree. So I think that's something where as a vice president now, it's been a nice extension of kind of the day-to-day things that I used to do, and now trying to move it a little bit into how can we be a bit more tactical with different client relationships, and also just be involved earlier on with the projects where it's maybe from the very beginning, they're like, hey, we're trying to look into this company, or we're kind of curious about this industry. Have you worked on it before? And I think that's something that's been really cool, that now that I've done a number of projects over the years, I have some semblance of experience usually in a couple of the different industries, at least where I'm kind of brought into it.
Love it. Okay, so question for you. What was the biggest problem you faced before, and what's the biggest problem you face now? How has that biggest problem changed?
Yeah, I think it's always been a balancing act challenge and of time. And I think that what that balancing has been has just changed over time. So whereas I felt like, before, one of our structures is, we're often working on two different projects at the same time. So we're kind of this double staffing model. And so I think the challenge is that, first year, coming out of college was to understand, how do I balance two projects and know what is actually a priority versus not? There's deadlines, but what is actually more of a, we need to have this done tonight versus not? And then I think that evolved into, how do I give better directions to my teams as a consultant when I was more of the project leader of what is actually a priority or not. And then now from a more client-facing perspective, but also kind of structural or strategy perspective is, I want to be involved with a lot of the projects, but then also how can I make sure to have enough time to reach out to different clients or to help with our organizational structure. And like, these are strategic things we need to be thinking about from a recruiting perspective or just from a systems perspective. So I feel like now it's like there's different things that I'm trying to balance, but it's always kind of this juggling act of time and where do I need to be most effective. And I think the double staffing model is kind of a good, nice way of almost feeling like a class setting, a class structure where it's like, okay, you have to balance multiple classes. It keeps things fresh, but I think it also just kind of continues to add to this kind of balancing act. So I think the challenge has always been, how do you balance different things? Now the priorities are maybe the longer term structural or operational and client work versus maybe some of the day-to-day project specifics.
Amazing. Well, I want to go through less of a you question and more of a kind of broader question, so we can just get some insight into how some of the characteristics of the work might differ from other places. So I'm just going to ask a few questions about day in the life for an IGS consultant. So the first one is, do you work in teams or independently? So I know you work on teams, but are you actually co-working with your teams? Are you sitting by yourself or in an office mostly working by yourself? How much of your time is in meetings versus solo work?
I would say a lot of the work is in teams. I mean, I think especially now that we've been kind of going back into more of a hybrid setting, I think we've had a lot better setup with working with people, some people remote, some people in the office. But I think a lot of the work, because our projects are typically faster paced, benefit from being around other people. And especially because, at our core, so much of our staff are younger people and people who are kind of really moving rapidly from role to role. And I think one of the best ways that we found that people can learn is to be in person, with all the caveats around it. I mean, I think there's so much chatter around, so many articles and thought pieces about, the value of being hybrid, the value of being fully in-person, remote. I think where we found the flexibility of the hybrid is it gives the flexibility, but then also gives the opportunities to kind of be able to, stop by someone's desk. So I would say, like, a lot of the time we do work in meetings, we have in teams, and we have team meetings and conference rooms. But then we do have enough time where you're working independently. I think it'd be hard if we were just always in meeting rooms and then not getting any work done. So I would say we probably still lean towards doing more independent work, but that there is enough of the time. So if I had to say, it's probably like 60% of the time you're kind of on your own independently, and then 40% is meeting times. I think one of the big things that I've really liked is we don't really have too many just miscellaneous random meetings. They're all intentional, and not overly intentional, but just like there's a purpose why we're meeting, and then there's usually a good outcome out of it. It doesn't have to be super structured and rigid with an agenda, but there's something that comes out of it. And I think that's something that I valued. I mean, I know I've heard from other people, not just in the consulting world, but in general, where some meetings are like, oh, do I really need this meeting? Like, why did I do that? But we really try to keep those to a minimum.
Amazing. What percentage of your day or week is spent in Excel and PowerPoint?
I would say probably about, from a consultant perspective, is maybe about 40 to 50% of the time. And that's mixed between Excel and PowerPoint. PowerPoint are our ultimate deliverables. I would say then like 40 or so percent of the time is leading, meetings or leading calls. So those might be with, interviews with industry experts. Those might be client calls. Those then might be just in team meetings. So a fair amount of it is communication and talking, which I think is an important skill and also helps mix up the day from the Excel and PowerPoint staring at that too long. And then there's probably like 10 or 20% of the time that's just kind of other miscellaneous things that are going on maybe outside of the specific casework that you might have in the course of the day.
We'll be right back after this quick message. There's only one true way to build consulting skills, and that's to work on a consulting project. Makes sense, right? If you want to add killer experience to your resume and prepare for life in consulting, join the next strategy sprint, taking place November 4th through the 10th, 2023. What is Strategy Sprint? It's a 1-week virtual consulting project where you work in a team of 6 directed by an MVP consultant to solve a strategic problem for a real-world business. We're running an early bird special. If you join Strategy Sprint between September 29th and October 6th, 2023, you'll receive an early bird discount. Click the link in this episode's show notes to learn more and to join. There are limited spots available in Strategy Sprint, and we'd love to have you join.
Do you have C-suite exposure? And understanding obviously what you do, there are of course a couple of different levels of that. But yeah, just answer that however you think makes the most sense.
Absolutely. I do. Like I said, we're a relatively small firm, such that on a typical project team, you're going to have people kind of from the managing directors all the way down to the entry level associates. And I think that was something that was probably a little bit intimidating, but exciting at the beginning. And I've settled into it a lot more is, probably at least once or twice a week, there were going to be full team meetings where we're all meeting together, where you're going to have to interface with and communicate with, not have to, you have the opportunity to interface and interact with people kind of all up and down the levels of experience. And I think also because we kind of float around from project team to project team, you get a lot of exposure to a lot of different C-suite and kind of our managing team. And so as a result, you get to learn from a lot of different styles. And then I think also, I think that just helps with the professional development a lot. And not only from like a project specific or work specific, but also just interpersonally as well. So I think from the very beginning, we have exposure to kind of everyone from the firm. And because we're mostly Boston based, though we have some new offices in New York and Chicago, you're able to actually get to see and meet a lot of the managing team as well. So I think that helps personalize the work, which is always a really, I think, a really valuable thing to any workplace.
I love it. Can you talk a little bit about the firm's current working model? You've mentioned hybrids. What does that mean? What days are you in the office? How many days are you in the office? How many days are you in Fiji? Tell me all the things.
with a fake background in the background, of course.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, you're like Boston skyline behind you. Right, snowing appropriately in winter when it should be.
Yeah. So we're hybrid, and how we've been doing it is kind of about 3 days a week. There's no specific days when we're in. When we have all hands and meetings, those are usually on Wednesdays, so those are the days when most people are in. But in general, it's kind of 3 days, and then the flexibility is to take the 2 days remote or in the office as you choose. I would say in general, a lot of our staff probably ends up being in the office more than just the 3 days, especially some of the new starts. I think they find it's helpful to learn from people kind of desk to desk. But in general, we're 3 days a week in the office, and most people are kind of in Boston based. And then as we've kind of opened up our New York and Chicago presences, have started to have some more people kind of based in those areas as well.
Love it. Amazing. And then finally, do you ever travel?
So we do a little bit. I think a lot of our work has kind of always been remote, and we've able to have been doing it over kind of video calls, phone calls, and that was before the pandemic and continue through the pandemic and really has continued through. We'll still do some kind of, to the extent there's clients in the Northeast or in Boston in particular, and we'll do some in-office kind of visits there. From a management team perspective, we might go to client-specific sites, or if we're doing any kind of strategic work, we might go to the company's sites in particular. But in general, a lot of our work is remote, which, I think that's something I'd like to have a home base while also, here and there have some travel. So it's been a good balance for me. I know there's some folks out there who really want to travel and like the appeal of that, and there's other kind of consulting firms that will do some more of the on-site travel. But then there's also the potential drawbacks if you don't want to be kind of traveling all the time and you like to have some home base. So I think it's nice. I think I and a lot of the people at IGS appreciate having that home base in Boston, but then traveling here and there for some different occasions.
Come on, offsite? Where's the offsite? You guys do an offsite?
We don't. So we're mostly but we all stay. So we'll stay in Boston.
It might be something we have to escalate in terms of okay.
This is a good idea though.
No,
this is a good idea. We can start to generate some ideas, especially now with some different office presidencies. We'll have to have some kind of central spot to be able to do that.
Yeah. I feel like Portugal is a great choice.
Yeah. Especially in the winter.
Just throwing it out there. Right. Okay, you've been promoted a couple times. So talk to me a little bit about how you got promoted. Right? What is the firm value that they saw in you that they chose to promote in you?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's been one of the big benefits of being at a firm like IGS, both in terms of its size as well as kind of its approach to its staff. I mean, we don't really have like rigid promotion cycles, though there's kind of a general cadence that typically happens. And but it is pretty rapid, and it can be pretty rapid. I would say probably it's kind of can be every year and a half or 2 years where you can kind of get a new responsibility. And I think what often takes the place is a little bit of the kind of some proactive work or trying to learn about that next level. Once you have comfort and experience and the ability to work successfully within your current responsibilities, do you express interest in learning about some of these new roles and responsibilities? And then I think some of that recognition then ends up kind of catching up to then get a promotion. I think we do a pretty good job of having people start on almost the next role just for a little bit of time to avoid, you don't want to, there's the fine line of you have someone start on a new role and you don't want to take advantage of them being on that new role, but you want to be able to have them have a few kind of test runs at that before then they can get promoted to the next role. And so I think the being able to learn, but also being really interested in learning and expressing that interest, I think is something that I'd like to think helped as I kind of moved along. And, I think there was a ton of people I learned from, and I think that's something I continue to do. And I think that's something that benefits probably anyone at IGS I would probably extend it to any organization. But the willingness to learn, the willingness to accept feedback from above and below, I think are things that probably help me position kind of along each of the promotion cycles that I've been through.
Amazing. So for this one, I'd love a story if you have one. And I would just love to know what opportunities you have to contribute beyond client work. You talked a lot about the client work, but if you're in a small firm and you're building the firm, how do you do that actually? Can you tell me about a time, a story, an initiative that you took just that might illustrate what's possible or even expected? Honestly, no, there's nothing bad about it being expected. Sometimes it's helpful from a cultural perspective. So how do you participate outside of your client work in building the firm?
Yeah. One of the things I've really I've focused on a lot has been some of the just overall training initiatives, because I think training is so hard. There's no pre-professional consulting programs, and there's crash course consulting, summer programs, there's crash course, different courses maybe that you could take in college, but there's nothing that really prepares you for consulting. And so I think one of the challenges we've always
maybe we should build that.
We should. I think there's something to be said for, we have people from all different majors and backgrounds, and I think that helps, because at its core, consulting is how do you take in a lot of different information and distill it into ideas that are relevant for whoever client you're advising. And so I think there's qualitative skills, there's quantitative skills that you can learn in any discipline. And so where we've struggled and tried to evolve over time is how do you capture those skills that people are coming to you with, and then bring that into a structure of what we do on a day-to-day basis with our work. So I think where I've been tried to help with that is have been on various kind of training committees over time, or at least been kind of part of training groups to try to help not only with kind of a mentoring on an individual basis, but also what are new training sessions that we should do and at what cadence. Because sometimes we'll have people starting at a lot of different times. We usually have kind of a set fall class, but we do have kind of classes starting and people starting at different times. And so I think it's really making sure that we're at the right cadence. And some of this has been trial and error. But I think it's things where we'll have people who have a lot of Excel experience, and we have a lot of people who have no Excel experience. And so I think some of the work that I've done is I was one who didn't have a lot of Excel experience coming into the role, and so that was intimidating at first. I figured out that was probably a steeper learning curve than other people who I started with. But trying to figure out what are the specific Excel trainings that we can do that are relevant to the analysis that we do and relevant to the work we do, because Excel can do all sorts of different things and it can be a whole jumble, but if we can make it more relevant and at the cadence where people will be exposed to that work, I think that's where I've tried to work on that a good amount, as well as then just trying to, I think, help with some of the just kind of informal training and informal events. I think that fostering some environment where people feel comfortable in asking questions is really important. And so I think that's where, to the extent I've weighed in and tried to help on some of those kind of what are some structure around unstructured things that we can help kind of, help new hires to start to feel more comfortable over their first 4, 6, 8, year of being at IGS.
I love it. Well, by the way, that was really helpful. We actually have a program called Fast Track. We should have you guys look at it and see if it would work for you. But it's like PowerPoint and Excel for consulting. So it's self-paced modules. But I'd love to get your feedback based on the work that you did, because I think you're right. It's really hard. Like at Bain, they were like, "Are you good at Excel?" And I was like, "Totally, I'm great at it." And then I was not good enough. I wasn't good at scenario modeling. I wasn't good at data analysis. I wasn't good at data cleaning. Like a lot of the things that I needed to do that were specifically applied. And then doing banking training might give you like shortcuts, but shortcuts aren't what's necessary. You need to like be able to strategically think about what you're going to build. So anyhow, we've built something that's really popular. It's been used by about 10,000 people. But I'd love your input because you're very close to the client. So
that would be great. Yeah, no, we should. Yeah, we definitely should continue the conversation. That would be great. Yeah, because it is hard, like you say. Like it's different skills from different roles. Yeah, combined together.
Exactly. Well, great. Okay, so just a few things. I'm going to shift gears now. 2 more parts of the chat. Let's talk about what IGS can do for everybody else, right? So we've talked a little bit about what IGS has done for you. Obviously, glowing recommendations, really great insight into what the firm does. But we have heard that y'all are hiring. And honestly, that news is very big news in a market like now. So it's great. It's great to know who's hiring and when they're hiring and why. So how do people figure out whether they'd be a good fit for y'all?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And yeah, we're definitely expanding not only our Boston presence, but also as we kind of grow into kind of our New York and Chicago offices. We've in kind of across roles. So whether kind of that be the entry level associate role, kind of our post MBA consultant role, and I think there's probably a couple of things that I would think about and why I think. As someone thinks about where they might want to go, things that might be kind of intriguing about the IGS experience. I think I've mentioned a few times, we're a smaller firm, and so I think there's a lot of benefits to that. You can get exposure to senior leadership very quickly. There's some pretty rapid promotion opportunities. There's a lot of really interesting learning opportunities. Because we're a generalist, but we focus on a lot of like the middle market, though that might be bigger deals or smaller deals. The middle market invests in a lot of different, very sometimes random things. So I think from an intellectual curiosity perspective, that's something that's always kept it really fresh for me. It's within even broad industry categories. There's a lot of really interesting companies with a lot of good stories that are doing and providing valuable services, valuable products. And so I think that's something that also is really appealing. And if that's something that's of interest, just the general kind of curiosity, intellectual curiosity, interest in learning about new things, I think that's another really kind of an appealing place for IGS to kind of fit into the career trajectory. And I think I'll probably preview what I'll talk about later from just a general people perspective. But I think there's a lot of really I've long maintained like a lot of really just good people at IGS. I think and by good, I mean not only just kind of smart, intelligent, driven, which I think makes for a vibrant workforce and workplace to be in. But I think there's also just a lot of genuinely good, kind people. And that's at least an environment that I know I've tried to foster, but then I've also thrived in. So I think it just makes it for more collaborative. It makes it less competitive. You're all striving for the same goal, which is to just try to be able to do the best on the project at the given time. And I think there's a lot of support to do that. And so that's something that I think if that's in a workplace that excites you would be another great opportunity to consider IGS for that. And so, yeah, we're hiring at a lot of the different levels. We have, especially kind of in the fall and the winters when we do a lot of our recruiting, but that also continues into the spring. But definitely across the levels, we're looking for more people to add to the team.
Let's talk tactics. So do people need to network with somebody? How many interviews do they have? Should they just submit a regular application? Do they need a cover letter? Just can you run me down a few of the pieces of advice that you have? Imagine that you're advising each of the people that's listening to this one-on-one, right? Like what do they do to make sure that y'all get to know them the best and that they get to know you as well?
Absolutely. So, our process does include a resume and a cover letter, and we have kind of a good kind of careers page really right at the front of our website. So if you go to igsboston.com, we have the kind of careers page, and that gives a lot of detail with links, some kind of tidbits from current IGSers to give a little bit more flavor, more than even just what I'm describing, as well as kind of the different deadlines. But our application will include kind of resumes and cover letters, and then typically a couple of rounds, 2 or 3 rounds of interviews, which include a mix of behavioral, kind of really getting to know you and you getting to know us, as well as kind of case interviews as well. So we kind of have a balance of getting to know you, as well as kind of trying to get a sense of how would you like the work that we're working on a day-to-day basis. From a networking perspective, it's not something where we'll say, oh, well, if they haven't networked, well, we're not going to consider them. Or if they've networked with 5 people, okay, we really should consider them. I think networking, it is something I have admittedly struggled with for all stages of my professional career, college career, and something I'm continuing to work on. But I think it's something that, with consulting being such a general category, and there's so many different types of consulting, I think it's worthwhile to reach out. I know for me, as an associate, as a consultant, now as a VP, like I love hearing from people who are interested, and I'm more than happy to, and a lot of IGS is, to be able to chat with people, because I think then it can really help just give a little bit more detail on like the types of the day-to-day or the types of projects we work on, because there is so many different types of consulting. There's general management, there's economic consulting, there's environmental consulting, and so on and so forth. So I think being able to describe a little bit about where we fit in, and it's like, oh, is that really where I want to go? I think is beneficial, and I would definitely encourage anyone who's interested in IGS to, to consider reaching out to anyone. We have a lot of the management team listed on the website with our kind of emails to be able to reach out to, as well as anyone from LinkedIn who you might be able to connect with. People are more than happy to chat and take some time to describe their experiences.
Now, you've been so nice and so positive, but let's just end on a very clear note for everyone before I ask you my 3 final fun questions. What should people not do? Come on, tell us what not to do, because we also want people to know where the boundary lines are.
Yeah. Well, I feel it's such a good question. I mean, I think that, probably if you're networking with everyone at IGS, then someone's going to be thinking, well, why are they really reaching out to everyone there, sending LinkedIn requests to everyone there? I think a targeted approach is much better than a quantity. Yes. I think quality always better than quantity. And then I think also just doing a little bit of the research ahead of time, even just looking at the website, just to understand a little bit about what we do. And, we're not really just general management consulting. We have kind of specific industries. Maybe there's a certain project that you look at, you're like, oh, that actually sounds kind of interesting. Maybe I'll ask them about that, or some other project that they worked on. I think that was always a strategy that I took, and I think is a good way to do it. So maybe what not to do is to not come with questions, but definitely come with questions, I think is the way that I would recommend for any of the outreach. And yeah, maybe not LinkedIn emails to everyone at the company, but I don't think people might not talk to put it all together, but.
Well, you're so nice. Thank you for your amazing kind of insight for the firm. The last thing that I just want to do is end with a couple of fun questions. I've got 3 of them for you. So the first one is a unique talent or skill.
Something that I think I've realized recently, it's probably not necessarily a skill or talent, but I think is attracting random questions on the street. It's not really something that I thought everyone would just get stopped by strangers. And I don't know if it's, I don't always wear headphones, or I'm just kind of looking up, or what, but I have now been repeatedly told by people around me, like, you always get stopped. It's just you. So I think that's maybe my unique.
That's amazing. I don't know. You're the one where everybody asks you directions or
ask me directions, ask me to weigh on what glasses they should pick in the glasses store. I just don't know. It's high pressure. I don't know what it is, but if I could give some sort of diplomatic response, I'll try to do so.
Love it. Little birdie told me you're a Boy Scout. Can you be a former Boy Scout? Are you always a Boy Scout? I'm not sure, but tell me one of your learnings from Boy Scouts.
I think that was something where it's just, it goes through a lot of the development stages from elementary school, middle school, and high school. Probably like many people, like the Eagle Scout project at the kind of capstone is kind of one that I think about most often. I mean, that was something I think I bit off a construction project that was way too big for me to chew. It took like, I was not as handy as I thought I was, but I think it's something that I learned. A village around me helped, and I leaned on a lot of different people and successfully finished through with it. But yeah, I think in the moment, some of the stressful moments, my junior and senior year of high school with it.
Love it. Last question. What's the most unusual food you've ever tried?
Oh, probably my quick reaction might be like crocodile, which I've had in South Africa, but maybe the more reachable one would be I recently had shredded coconut on pizza in Canada, which maybe is a Canadian thing, but it actually worked out pretty well, surprisingly well. Maybe this gets into like the Hawaiian pizza kind of controversy, but
well, it's like it's competing with Hawaiian, almost.
Yeah, but it worked out actually much better than I thought. So maybe that's a little bit of a more digestible, kind of more unique.
Honestly, I have two friends in different parts of the country that run pretty like profitable pizza joints. Yeah. And they are specialized in unusual flavor profiles. I'm gonna have to pass it on to them.
Yeah, shredded coconut cooked on top. It worked out really well.
Totally. Mostly so I'll be like, I'll be by. I'm gonna try this out for y'all. So yep. Yeah, amazing. Well, Raymond, anything, any final tips, pieces of advice, anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to share with folks today before we sign off?
No, I mean, I think IGS has been a really great place for me for the last 6 years. And obviously, there's a lot of really positives that I've had from my experiences. So definitely encourage anyone to reach out to me if you have questions. I'm sure I think there will be some links in the description as well. And yeah. But yeah, definitely, really was appreciative of the opportunity to come on here, and hope get to meet a lot of different people over the next few months, few years.
Love it. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for listening to this great conversation with IGS. We love getting to know new consulting firms and sharing them with our audience. Many of them have no idea what you do or how you're different from other places, and the only way that we can figure it out is to create new transparency through storytelling. If you would like to be a guest on our podcast, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out, team@managementconsulted.com. And as always, for everyone who's listening, please subscribe to the podcast so you can get it every time it downloads, and provide it to other people who may be interested in listening by sharing it with a friend. Thanks so much for joining us today.